Liz Bullard and Preston. We're going to hear from Preston occasionally in this, but I love dogs, so it's okay. Liz Bullard, thank you so much for joining the Positively Joy podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm so excited, and you'll hear my corgi, Preston. So we're happy to be here.
Oh, so good. So for people who are either regular listeners or new, many of you know that we have pivoted on the podcast, and we're now talking about relationships. We're talking about divorce, especially in Christian circles, because that can be difficult. And so we have heard from two guests previously, Sarah Daigle and Dawn Love. And in between those interviews, I like to come back on and recap a little bit of what I've learned from them. But today I have asked Liz to join me. Liz is an author and coach, and I have asked her to come and join me today so we can kind of unpack what we heard from Dawn Love last week. If you've not listened to Dawn's podcast episode, I encourage you to go listen to it, because we'll be talking about what she told us. And then we'll go ahead and get going. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me. I'm so excited to jump in. Both episodes have been absolutely fantastic and just packed full of information and inspiration.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going. What kind of coach are you? Where are you? And things like that.
Awesome. So, hi, everyone. My name is Liz. I am in the great state of Connecticut, and I am a therapist, author, and coach. I do therapy helping both children and adults work through anxiety, depression, and a variety of mental health issues, some minor traumas, and life transitions, including grief and loss and divorce. I'm also a coach where I help creatives move from stuck to started on their projects. So if you are a creative, an entrepreneur, a visionary, and you just can't move that project along, maybe you've lost that spark, maybe procrastination or imposter syndrome are some of the things that are slowing you down, give me a call and let's schedule a consult, and I'd be happy to help you get back to doing the things that you love, which is creating. And so that's just a little bit about me. I'm also a foodie and a corgi mom.
Well, and I will definitely put your contact info in the show notes. But you just mentioned two things. You mentioned procrastination. And gosh, I said two things. There was another one.
Imposter syndrome.
And imposter syndrome. Thank you. And those two things we heard from Dawn last week in her own relationships, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, Dawn told me that it took her 4 times to file the divorce. And when she said that, now I just have to say, so, again, I've been divorced, and it is very difficult, as she told us. And I remember being in the parking lot of the attorney's office and just, again, questioning, asking God, am I supposed to do this? Give me a sign. I mean, there can be doubt. Absolutely, there can be doubt. There can be procrastination. For her, it took her that long because she had that doubt. And then she also mentioned imposter syndrome. And so there's a lot of, I think, women, and I'm talking about divorce, but I mean, I really think that we can apply this to really anyone in a breakup or even having other kinds of significant loss.
Absolutely.
It can make you use the word stuck. It can make you feel stuck, right?
1000%. And to add kind of like the mental health context, trigger warning, but to say abuse, but abuse wasn't necessarily mentioned, but we do know statistics show people, try to leave 7 times before they are successful. And so it is very common if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't leave, or if you struggle with that, you are not alone. It takes people a long time. And the same thing you mentioned, I work with clients on relationship issues, and that decision to leave is very hard because you have history, you have connection with this person. You think about the life you could have. And so there's so many things that could have you stuck. So if you're listening, I hope that resonated with you and made you feel not alone, because, you're not.
Absolutely. And that's why we pivoted to this, because God was putting it in my heart that we needed to talk about this. We need to talk about it because there's a lot of people out there that I think that this will resonate with. So let's talk a little bit about what you just said. You said connection, and relationship with. So Dawn's a single mom. So she knew, well, now she's a single mom, but she had children in this relationship. And so she knew that that was going to be a question, that was going to be an ongoing kind of thing. And even though she felt that the divorce was necessary, she needed to maintain, and many of you out there who are in the same situation want to maintain some kind of relationship with the father. And I realize that there are some cases where that doesn't happen, that maybe the father doesn't want to be involved. Sarah Daigle, that I talked to earlier, I think that she questioned like whether or not he was going to be involved at one point in her children's lives. And so those are questions that I think we have. When we have questions like that, that's making us stuck, what do we do to move forward?
Oh, that's a great question, right? So, a lot of times when I work with clients and we talk about thoughts, something that they find helpful is one, naming it, right? Because that sometimes takes the wind out of it. It's not as scary. It's not like this boogeyman. So, like, really, like, just look at that thought and, like, it's okay to look at that thought and to recognize what happens in your mind and your body when that thought comes up, right? So, if it's more like your thoughts start racing and things like that, you may do a lot of grounding, things to remind you you're in the present. You're not in the future where this thought could manifest. You're not in the past where this thought could be like in the past, you didn't have great decisions. You're right here in the present moment. So recognizing that if you notice a lot of physical things like your heart is beating fast, you feel nervous or jittery, just ground yourself, walk around, take care of what happens when that thought comes up. And that's going to help you address the first part. The second part that I really help people with is recognizing, is this fact or fiction, right? So the way anxiety works, right? It's this fear of what could happen, and it thinks that it's being helpful, right? We have anxiety to let us know, like, okay, we're walking down a dark alley. We should maybe be alert to make sure danger isn't there. Anxiety is helpful. There's just sometimes anxiety is not being that helpful friend it thinks it's being. And so you really have to parse through, okay, what parts of this thought are helpful or are rooted in fact, and which are me, having all or nothing thinking or catastrophizing or number of cognitive distortions or thinking errors that you might be having. So those are the two areas where I would start with, is recognizing what happens when you have this thought and taking care of those symptoms, and just really being really concrete, taking the emotion out of that thought and saying which parts are being helpful and helping me plan for things like a change in financial situation, a change in support, a change in things that really will impact your life, and which really aren't needed. And it's just that thought being super, super big or, fearful.
And the Bible says, take every thought captive. And that means that in that context, that we should be careful of the lies that we tell ourselves. And we're going to have an upcoming episode on the lies we tell ourselves, when we get divorced. However, we're human. We have thoughts. God gave us thoughts. He gave us a brain. So it's not that the thoughts are bad, but we need to know what to do with it, right?
Yeah, I love that, right? Your thoughts are not bad. And like a lot of people struggle with that. Like, oh, I had this thought. Am I a bad person? And like thoughts and feelings are not bad. It's our behaviors, right? So if you have this thought and you start reacting, right? You're yelling at people, you're angry, or you beat up on yourself, right? That's when, right? We don't want that. But your thoughts, they're not bad. And it's okay to sit with them and explore them.
So, I really appreciated Dawn because she shared so much with us, and she mentioned the beginnings of the relationship. Now, I know a lot of times when we're talking about divorce now, we're talking about the end of a relationship, but many of us do want to go forward and find perhaps a new relationship. Both Sarah said that she, a lot of times we give ourselves some time. But Sarah says she would be into that, and Dawn as well. But looking back at something that Dawn said I thought was really interesting was their beginnings. They really didn't start as friends. They did not have they didn't have a friendship to cement the relationship on. In fact, what they had were some bad habits that she shared with us. She shared with us that there was some alcohol and some drugs. Probably not the best way to start a relationship. But I thought that was interesting in that there wasn't a friendship to cement it. Now, for me, my first husband, we didn't have the faith connection. He didn't believe in the same things that I believed in. And so when I got remarried, that was like, you need to have a relationship with Jesus. But that was just for me. I had to be very strong on that. And that's, that's who I ended up with, someone that had a strong relationship with Jesus. But no matter what the friendship is that you need to hang it on, it can't be something that's habitual. Right? Would you agree with that?
1000%. Because
And when I say habitual, I just mean something that's just not strong, not important.
right. So like if we take out addiction, right, and you just put like, I don't know, a deck of cards or like chess or whatever, right? Like that's a good foundation. It's a good connector. But if that's all you have, well, what happens when that's gone, right? That is not something that's going to carry you through the trials and tribulations that happen with life in a relationship. And so absolutely it has to grow into more. And kind of like you can see or imagine from the episode, if one person decides to, so if we take addiction for one instance, right? If one person stops that, if someone wants to move in a different direction, now you don't have anything in common. And now you're looking at this person, it's like, well, what do we really have? And sometimes the answer is nothing.
And to her credit, she did indeed do that because she got pregnant. And she was not going to continue her addiction while she was pregnant for the sake of the baby. So you're absolutely right. That certainly can happen. Things change. People change in relationships. I mean, you're interested in some things at first and maybe you're not. But something that you're basing your life on, that is something that you must. Hi, Preston. That's something that I would think is too important, or your relationship is too important to base it on something that could so radically change. That would change your whole who you are.
Absolutely. Like my mom always says, take time to know her, that song, take time to know her, like in a relationship, take time to know this person that you are going to be with. Take time to know all of them. And can you deal with all of this person and all of the things that make them up because you are with them, right? It's a little easier when you're dating to just say like, all right, I'm picking up and I'm leaving. But when you're married and you're with someone, it's a lot of different things that happen. And divorce can be complicated and messy and splitting assets. So take time to know the person you're with, and can you live with all of them and how they are when you're getting married?
So very, very important. I think that there's a fear when you are making that decision. And like you said, things are going to change, whether you stay and that person leaves the house or whether you have to leave. And in this case, she left and she was in, an apartment with her children. And it was very different than what they had experienced before. So now, not only has your relationship, but your home, your environment has changed. I mean, that can just be really, really scary. And sometimes the woman and the children get to stay in the home, but there's other things that they're going to give up. For example, for myself, I was able to stay in the home, but I took on all the bills. I basically said, you can walk away and not have to worry about anything else. And he chose to do that. But then I had some new worries on me after that, so there's going to be a change always, but such a fear. So when you're in that situation and you're talking to your clients, what is something, and I know that Preston he's going to leave us for a moment. What is something that you might to have them overcome the fear, in that moment? And it's not to say that you're not going to continue to have fears. We're human. So you're going to continue to have fears. But of course, on this show, what we're talking about is obviously we are leaning on our faith in the Lord. We're leaning on our faith and understanding that He is a faithful God and He'll always be with us. But having fears is certainly very common for the human experience. So when you're working with people, what would you tell them?
Yeah. And first I'll speak to the spiritual, right? Because that is a component, right? When we are believers and we have a belief in Christ, first you're going to lean on that, right? Because we do not know the outcome. And so really what I would recommend is using your faith, right? What are the scriptures for the support system, right? Who are the people that when uncertainty is coming up, like that you can lean on and remind you of who God says you are? So for the believers, I would say, really start there and rest in that comfort. If you happen to be someone who doesn't have a faith base, what that might look like is who are your supports that can help you for these real things, right? So if you are concerned about finances, if you are concerned about employment, childcare, all these real things that you have to deal with, right? Who are the people that can help you? And unfortunately, sometimes the answer is no one. And so you really have to think at who are the resources in your community, right? So it may look a little different. And also having that radical acceptance that life may not look different. I mean, might not look the same, but that's okay. You can still be at peace. You can still be happy. You can still deal with these transitions. So think about what are the strengths that you have, whether that's resilience, whether that's your faith, your tenacity. What are the things that can help you navigate the ups and downs as you transition from your routine to something new? So that's what I would help clients with, and just holding space for, yeah, there are uncomfortable moments. And like, it's okay to sit with, I don't like this moment, but know that this is a moment and not where your destination is.
And so I want to read a little bit of what Dawn said in the episode. She said, and so I give all credit to God, because had it not been for him, I think I would have lost my mind a long time ago. But that's kind of like my story, in a nutshell. It's just been, it's been very hard, she says. But even now that my children are older, I look back over everything that I've been through. But I also did a little soul searching in the process. And because I decided to do the work to heal, I decided to do the work to forgive not only him, but myself, so that I can be a better person for my children. Let's talk about forgiveness for a minute.
Yes.
Forgiveness is a tool. I mean, it's a real thing.
Absolutely. Like, that comes up a lot. Recently, I was working with a client, especially that part about forgiving your past self. Sometimes we can look back at the decisions and have so much judgment for ourselves. And that does nothing but keep us in a cycle of shame, and we do not move forward. And so one thing me and this client worked on was like just giving thanks for that past version. Even if it's, you have to just write a love letter to that past version of like, thank you for making the mistakes. Thank you for growing, because that helped me link to this resource, or it helped me to know that I wanted better. But really, sometimes you have to just look at that old person and say like, just thank you for being in that place. Thank you for getting through that place and not stopping there. That is such a critical piece in letting go and moving forward.
One part of Dawn's story is that she actually worked in ministry, and she found that some of the people in ministry around her were not accepting of her divorce. Now, certainly we live in a time where divorce generally in the workplace is accepted. But depending on where you are, what part of the country, and what kind of work you're doing, you may find yourself, not the same situation, but in a situation like Dawn, where you're not getting the support around you at work, or maybe even among your friends. If you're in a situation like that, where you're not getting that kind of support from people that you really would think that you would get support from, how can you handle that in that time?
That is such a hard one. And again, when people are trying to leave, I can't tell you how many times like they've went to a parent, a friend, and they sometimes have a little bit of shame, or sometimes that traditional thinking of, well, you can't leave. This is the father of your child. You can't leave. You're breaking up the family. And I'm talking about things can be really bad, and people are still like, well, you have to stay. And like, you do not have to stay in a situation that is harmful for you or the people that you love. That is okay. And sometimes you have to be the first person to realize that, and to accept that for you and for your self-love, to know that it is okay to make a decision that is based in your healing and your peace. And so like, I would say start there, because it's not for you to do the work of someone else, whether that be an employer, a coworker, sometimes even your support system. You cannot do the work and break the cycles of abuse and oppression for them. So you have to realize it's okay for me to make this decision. It's okay for a step two households. It's okay for our income to change. Like, just start telling yourself that every day until you believe it, whether you're still in that situation or in the process of leaving, just telling yourself it's okay to make this decision. So I would say start there.
Okay. I think that a lot of people in the midst of this feel unloved. And like somehow it's either their fault, or even if they don't think it's their fault, even if they don't like cognitively think it's their fault, somehow deep down in there, you think it's your fault. Like it's your fault that something didn't
Absolutely.
work out, or it's
Mhm.
your fault that you made a mistake and you couldn't make the marriage succeed. I want to
Mhm.
be really clear on this, and you're going to hear me say this probably once in every episode of these kinds of recaps. This is not an anti-marriage podcast, not at all. But we know things happen, and we know that when a separation or a divorce does happen, you, the person who's in that, need to take care of yourself and need to have a mindset that God wants you to have.
Mhm.
And so that unlovable thing, that was a big thing for me. Big thing for me.
Absolutely. And like, thank you for saying that because like, even in 2025, people really do struggle with, is it okay to leave? Will God not love me anymore? And I will venture to say, yeah, he is our, we are his children and he wants us the best for us. I believe that in our soul, that helps me with a lot of situations. So absolutely. Thank you for that reminder.
Of course. Of course. Well, we're going to look ahead, and we've got Amanda Schaefer coming up on the show next week. And she is going to talk about, and of course, it's close to my heart, she's going to talk about being able to keep that joy and find that hope, even in the midst of all of these situations that we're talking about. It's tough, but these are real situations. The statistics say that 50% of marriages end up in divorce. Now, I haven't looked at that stat in maybe a year or so. Maybe it's down, maybe it's up, but it's right around that 50%. And I'm not saying that all of those marriages are among believers or people of faith, but that's a lot of people. That's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who have a marriage that somehow doesn't last. And then also when you factor in people who are in long-term relationships and those end. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that at some point in their life have a separation, and it can really affect the trajectory, in my opinion, of your life and of your future relationships. And getting it right as soon as you can, understanding that we need to lean on God, lean on our faith, but we also need to practice some self-care is important. So before we end the show, let's talk about a little self-care. I know you're into self-care, that
Yes.
we can practice just to keep our mindset positive.
Yeah, I love that question. And this is where you get to be really personal listeners. And so you really get to sit with, this is more than just bubble baths and like a shopping spree. But really, what are the things that fill your emotional cup, right? Whether that's just sitting with a friend, sitting in the sun, whether that's going for, I like to say, for walks with my dog, right? So at the end of the day, me and Preston, when it's not super cold in the winter, we go for a walk and I remind myself to just be in this present moment, right? That fills my cup. But this is where you really get to explore what are the things that make you feel whole. And if you're at a
Mhm.
place where that's really hard, right? Where nothing is filling that gap, start with the things that you used to enjoy, right? Start with just the habit of, I'm going to get up every day and take a shower. I'm going to get up every day and put on clean clothes. Like start there and then build, right? If it's, I used to like reading books, go sit at the bookstore. Even if you don't have the energy to pick up a book, go sit there. But really create that space for you. And I'm actually going to steal this from another therapist. I think it was Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. She talked about she was going through an end of a relationship and she had told her friend, I need you to check on me a little bit more until I tell you not to. Every day, call me a couple times a day, check in on me until I tell you I'm good. Stop doing that. And, who is that person in your life, right? Who's that person where you could be like, I'm going through something and just check on me. I just need you to love on me a little bit more until I say I'm good. And that could go a long way.
So good. Liz, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. We hope you'll come back and maybe help me
Always.
unpack some things in the future. Okay, very good, good. Well, make sure that we put information about you. I'd have to say, everyone, Liz is an author. She's written some amazing novels. One is about Preston, if you love dogs, and but Sleeping Beauty is the new one with a
Yes.
wonderful heroine. We're into, well, you write fantasy, but this is kind of entering the thriller with
Yes.
romantic elements
Yeah.
genre,
Thriller,
you would say.
mystery. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The romantic is a lot stronger than I thought it was in this. And so,
I
yeah,
know,
that's,
me too. We start writing these thriller books, but we got to throw some romance in there, right?
hmm
Same with me with my books. Well, we'll put all that in there so people can, continue to get to know you a little better. Again, because we'd love to have you back. We appreciate it. And so everyone, we will have our interviews with gracious people who want to tell us their experiences. But then the next week, we will begin to unpack some of what they said. And so we'll continue on this road in some form or fashion. And we definitely want to see you next week. So join us. And again, Liz, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.